Hello everyone, I'm the Weather Dude. Welcome back, and today we are going to be talking about Invest 97E that is also forming in the Pacific. Of course, we had 96E that developed into Hurricane Felicia, Category 4 powerful monster that's heading towards Hawaii, but probably south of there. But now we're talking about Invest 97E today and what that could become. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe and like the video if you have not already, because it'll help this video get out to more people that might probably want to see this video. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So here we have Invest 97E. Of course, we have Felicia over here. That is, of course, our Category 4 hurricane right now. As you can see, 90% chance of development in the next 5 days here with our disturbance. This is Invest 97E. It starts with thunderstorms associated with a broad area of low pressure, a few hundred miles southwest of the coast of southwestern Mexico. Environmental conditions are going to be conducive for additional development, and you could see tropical development or tropical depression maybe in the next few days as this moves towards the west-northwest around 15 miles per hour. Now, that's short term because, as you can see, in the next 5 days or so, it's going to be in this zone, or at least in the next 2 days anyway. So after that, what's going to happen? And that's what we're going to be talking about here today. Our next name on our list, we have Felicia right now. Guillermo is the next name on our list, for the Pacific at least, followed by Hilda after that. So looking at this thing on the satellite right now, it's starting to get its rotation, right? Like you can see, it's trying. There's definitely a lot of convection associated right here on like near center. And the center, I think, is around, let's see, 107.15, or those are like the coordinates. Now, of course, that was as of 11 p.m. Pacific time yesterday. So that's probably a few hours behind our Eastern time. But as you can see, the low is pretty much sitting right about here or so. All right. So it is moving a little bit north now because, remember, National Hurricane Center had the low at 15 degrees north several hours ago. That's now up here. So it has moved a bit farther to the north. And even the bands on the northern side of it, like pretty sure Mexico is like right here. So it's still getting a lot of convection just offshore of Mexico. But we have seen a good flare-up of thunderstorms near storm center. This is the low as of 2 o'clock this morning. All right. Again, just shy of 16 degrees north latitude, 108 degrees west longitude. All right. And here we have our sea surface temperatures. What does it look like out there? All right. So it's currently sitting in this. Oops, sorry about that. It's currently sitting in the warmer waters, as you can see right here, right? But after that, it's going to be moving in a northwesterly direction as opposed to Felicia, so it's going to run into this. Felicia went a bit further south and was kind of able to avoid the worst of that and able to stay in those, marginally warmer waters. All right, and that's how it became and it rapidly intensified on top of that. It became a Cat 4. So that's why, at least for the Eastern Pacific, storms that come from there, I think Hawaii is going to be protected a little bit by this colder water to its east. Although water around mainland Hawaii is a bit warmer. Of course, water to the east, that's where the storms come from. Mostly for Hawaii, they come from the east, or sometimes they can even come from the south. We've seen that in history as well. All right, so sea surface temperature is a bit above average right now, could fall below average for the storm later. As you can see, waters, though, in this area generally have trended upward, however. So that's a trend that we don't want to see because then Hawaii might not be so protected. But look, you can see here. So here's the warmer waters it's sitting in right now, right, in this region right here. But as it continues to move to the north and west, right, we start to lose. Like the yellow is basically water above 75, above 76 Fahrenheit. Like that's like marginally warmer waters. But once you hit those greens, like all hope is pretty much lost for the storm system. So we'll see. Maybe we'll see we'll have to see what's left of it if it does head towards Hawaii. Felicia, luckily, will be starting its weakening trend pretty soon. It will be heading south of Hawaii, or pretty far south, like probably like somewhat like this. So Hawaii, maybe you might get some swells at best. But we'll see. 97E, I'd say, is probably a bigger threat in terms of potential than Felicia is right now. So we're going to be looking at a lot of tracking guidance, starting with this one to see where the storms bring it. Now, COTI and the COT1 and COT2 bring it north, although I would say these models are probably the ones that are correct here. So if you were to draw a cone, it would probably go somewhat like this, is at least what the models are saying right now. So pretty much tracking in the general direction of Hawaii, starting on a northwest turn, then making a due west turn. So if it turns west quick enough, it might, similar to what Felicia did, it might avoid these slightly cooler waters that are to the north of it. Right, so you can see Felicia is already farther south. The system's already farther north than Felicia is right now. It is moving west-southwest. Look at that pressure, though. 954 millibars. It's only moving at 9 miles an hour. This disturbance behind it is moving about 15 miles per hour. Here's some GEFS model tracks. As you can see here, right, they do have a strengthening of the storm system, but then once it gets farther west enough into those cooler waters, then they have it losing strength a little bit. But if we're paying attention to just the track, bringing it westbound, so probably I'd say a cone somewhat like this, bringing the storm to the west, really not making a southward turn, so maybe Hawaii could get some minor impacts from this. We'll have to see. And the GEPS model tracks, not too many runs have come in yet, but as you can see, pretty much tracking in this general direction, maybe northwest and turning due west eventually. Now, if we look at the intensity guidance, remember, this is how Felicia looked, right? It was a tropical storm, maybe Cat 1, and then weakening and end up being a Cat 4 because of rapid intensification. If this storm is going to rapidly intensify, if it were to, it has to be now because, as you can see here, it's running out of time to be in those, warmer waters. At least Felicia had a bit longer time in the warmer waters. This storm doesn't because it's a bit farther north in latitude. So if it wants to strengthen, it's got to do it quickly. I think this storm will not be as strong as Felicia because of it's higher in latitude. I still think there's definitely potential for a Category 1 here, maybe even a Cat 2. But from the model intensity guidance, most keep it a mid to strong tropical storm and then eventually weakening once it hits those colder waters, which I think is acceptable. All right, but the question is, how strong does the storm get before it starts weakening? Could get to a Cat 2, could get to a Cat 1. I think major hurricane is probably out of the realm of possibility. I'm not ruling it out completely, but I think it's pretty unlikely. I think a Cat 1 or Cat 2. But again, the Pacific is a pretty, wild area of water, so there's a lot of warm water out in the Pacific. But if it's going to rapidly intensify, it's probably going to start now, if it were to. So here's the storm center and some more early cycle tracking guidance. And you can see mostly on that westward trend, although some do have to bring it a bit farther north. I remember the COTI I just showed you guys, or COT1 I just showed you earlier. But there are a couple other models on this map that do bring a bit farther north in latitude than some of the other models do. And again, if that's the case, storm's going to be a bit weaker. All right, now here's some GFS guidance. Let's zoom out real quick. There we go. All right, so here's some GFS ensembles, NCP, GFS. And you can see mostly in this area, but look what's right here. All right, there's Hawaii. So a lot of the guidance, now of course that could be because this guidance is stopped short, can only go out a certain amount of time. Most of them go out 192 or hours or so. But if you were to draw these out further, the general direction would be Hawaii. But again, no guarantee for Hawaii yet, because these models, like one model, 48 hours has it up here, another has it down here. Like the disagreement here is even just out for two days, even for 1 day. Some models have it up here, some have it down here. So it's a lot of disagreement for just 1 day. All right, so that's a little concerning there from the models. All right, so looking at some more, this is the EPS track guidance, so the European track guidance. Again, generally in the direction of Hawaii, the only question is how strong is it when it gets there, if it gets there. All right, so here is the ship diagnostics message here, the GFS version of it. Really, wind shear is low the entire next 7 days. The problem, though, is the sea surface temperatures, 28 Celsius, 27, then falls to 25. So really, according to this, it's going to hit those cooler waters in about 3 days or so. So it's going to have about 3 days to strengthen. Then bouncing back and forth between 24 and 25. Honestly, that's like mid-70s. So it's not all that warm. Maybe if the shear and dry air are very low, then these waters could maybe keep the storm at its same strength. But these waters, 24, 25 Celsius, are not really good for strengthening, so to speak. Storm speed may slow down a little bit to about, according to this, it's moving at about almost 18, 19 miles an hour. Of course, because the speeds are at knots. Maybe slowing down to 10 to 15 miles an hour, which is pretty much what it's moving at right now, and maybe picking up speed later on. And as you can see, it's going to start losing its heat content pretty fast here. Eventually, by next 60 or 72 hours, it's going to have no heat content to work with, which in favor of the storm is not very good. So let's look at the models now. So we have the GFS, the Hwrf, and the European model. Now I like to look at the relative humidity map because you can see the surface pressure, the surface winds, and the upper level winds, or mid-level winds I should say. All right, because the question is how stacked is that storm center? So as you can see right now, this is as the last hurricane center advisory, 2 a.m. this morning. Our surface low is right here, right? But notice the mid-level winds. The mid-level winds are kind of shearing the storm like this, right? It's not the mid-level center is actually not even, it's the mid-level center is not even fully round. It's like an oval, and it's sitting down here. There's your mid-level center, and then there's your surface center. And that's why, obviously, it's a weaker storm, so it's going to happen, right? So it's kind of, it's one broad area of low pressure. It's not a tightly wound up area of, low pressure yet. And of course, you don't see as many dark greens on here either. But it's going to start to gain some moisture, some convection. And you can see the low-level center or mid-level center is in here. The surface center is in here. All right, so not all that different. It's starting to come a little bit closer together. This is by 2 a.m. Sunday. All right, and then let's keep going. And then it's trying, but then you also got the dry air that's off to the west right here. That's going to come down from this way. And you can see the surface center is now right here on Sunday afternoon, but then the mid-level center is down here again. So it's not like Elsa. Elsa had that same problem. It's not as stacked. But then eventually, right, it starts to get even closer. So there's the low center, surface center, your mid-level center. They're not fully stacked, but it's starting to get a lot better. Therefore, the storm is strengthening. And notice there's really not much relative humidity, not much convection. It's mostly on the northeast and east side, all right? Because, of course, there's a lot of dry air off to the west, all right? And then, all right, so let's keep this rolling right here. And you can see it gets a little bit better. I don't know if it'll ever get fully stacked, like the fully stacked column that we have here. Although we start to see a bit more high relative humidities on the western side. Surface center is now here, and mid-level center is now down here. So getting a lot closer. This is by Tuesday afternoon now, so we're going out 96 hours. Right, and then once it starts moving west, a little bit more dry air starts to find its way in. Now we have a surface center that's here and a mid-level center once again that's kind of out here still. So this is the storm, like what we have with Elsa, will probably strengthen a little bit, not very fast. Maybe to a Cat 1, maybe a Cat 2. All right, and then it's going to start weakening because it's not stacked. It can't really support itself. All right, so as you can see here, once the storm starts dropping south, that's what the GFS says, now it's a bit better stacked, right? Our surface low is right here, and maybe a mid-level center in there, all right? Pretty hard to make out, but getting a little bit better stacked, and then just as it does, the storm pretty much loses it all, right? Now we got pretty much a dry air, and all the convection is pretty much out here, or at least the moisture, so then it kind of starts to lose it. All right, looking at the surface winds, right? This is going to reflect in the wind graph. So as you can see, storm gets pretty strong. I saw 58 knots right here, right? So you can see in the top right, 58 knots, 998 millibars of pressure. So that's about 65 to 70 mile an hour sustained winds. But then look what happens. Because it's not being stacked, it's going to start weakening a little bit. Still a tropical storm, then loses that tropical storm status, and then that's pretty much it. And then they probably bring it south of Hawaii as well. Next model, Hwrf model. Now, looking at the storm as of 2 a.m., here is your surface low, but notice there's really no mid-level center at all. The winds are turning, which is like a half a rotation, right? A low is pretty much rotated like this. We have a half a rotation, right? So the mid-level winds are going like this, even though the surface winds are going like this. So pretty sheared off system right now. I cannot, like, there is literally no mid-level rotation. All the winds are coming out of the south and then moving from west or east to west. So this storm is really not stacking itself well right now. But let's head on time. We start to see a low-level center here, or surface center by 5 p.m. on Saturday, or today. And our mid-level low is down here, right? So I got two areas of rotation, one at the surface, one at the mid-levels. And then eventually, like you see right here, storm starts getting a little more tightly wound up. And it looks like a pretty small system by the looks of it, too. Although we will see bands well outside of it. At this point, mid-level center is sort of right in there, all right? So it becomes a bit better stacked, but then look what starts to happen. Once the low kind of detaches itself from that highest area of moisture, now mid-level winds are coming in like this again. Our low-level center or mid-level center is in there, and obviously the red L is the surface low. But then it reorganizes again, right? There's your 989 millibar, and this is in general a pretty good intensity forecast model. Then you can see here's your convection, or your highest relative humidities, your moisture on the east side. All right, so it becomes a bit better wound up once again, right? And pretty much sustaining its strength in terms of looking at the millibar. It looks like it's sustaining its strength, then it weakens. Then all the convection, all right, and in movement with the mid-level wind is all going like this. And then you got your dry air coming in like this. It's such a broad rotation. This thing's probably going to expand out a lot. But then it's going to weaken. Even though we have our mid-level center and low-level center are pretty much right on top of each other, almost perfectly, not quite. But now we got a lot of dry air interfering. All the convection or highest moisture is pretty much off to the north at this point. And then it continues to move to the west, and then that's pretty much it. And it becomes like a dry center, as we saw with the other model. Again, there's your higher relative humidities up there. Your mid-level center is down here. Your surface center is here, and not a very stacked storm in general. Now, looking at the surface winds, what do they have? GFS so far predicted a 65 to 70 mile an hour tropical storm. Now, this model gets 62 knots of wind, which is probably just shy because 64 knots is Category 1 status. So 62 is probably about 71 to 73 mile an hour, 70 to 73 mile an hour winds. Not quite getting there. All right, as you can see, 62 knots is the peak strength. And remember, it was strengthening, and then weakening, and strengthening again right here, and then weakening again as we get further out in time. Maybe not, according to this, not becoming a tropical depression until 2 a.m. on Thursday. It just by a little bit loses that tropical storm status. Literally 34 knots is tropical storm status. So it could even still be a tropical storm by this point. All right, and finally, looking at the European model here, here's Felicia for smaller storms, slightly larger storm out to the east. That's 97E here. So Invest 97E continues to move to the west. All right, and there you can see it right there. Not really holding its strength too well. So thank you guys for watching today's video. I think 97E has a better threat of hitting, or better chance of hitting Hawaii than Felicia does. So still have to watch it very closely. Thank you guys for watching today's video. I am the Weather Dude signing off. Till next time, I'll catch you guys in the next video.